Shabbat Shalom.
Now we're ready.
Shabbat Shalom. Tomorrow we commemorate Tisha B'Av, the ninth day of the month of Av and the most somber day in the Jewish year. It is said that a series of major tragedies have befallen the Jewish people on this day, including the destruction of the first and second temples. It is a day of mourning for being kicked out of the land of Israel, the destruction of Jerusalem, and many other medieval expulsions from various different lands. It is the designated time that we publicly acknowledge our tribe's collective suffering throughout our long history. And when a dark history seems to follow an entire people throughout the centuries, it is only natural to ask why. There are times when these questions are part of a genuine search for meaning, and there are times when our questions serve as lamentations. We cry out, why me? Why us? How can this have happened? When will enough be enough? The word Eicha, the title of our traditional text we read on Tisha B'Av, literally translates to how, as in how can this be? Over the centuries, our rabbinic literature attempts to answer these lamenting questions. One of the ways the rabbis understood this reason for our suffering is the widespread dominance of Sinat Chinam, baseless and unwarranted hatred. We are told that baseless hatred was rampant during the temple period, that the destruction was our divine punishment for the unethical way people were treating one another. That is why Tisha B'Av also requires us to reflect on our words and on our actions, and to commit to improving our way of living in the world. This past weekend, I had the privilege of officiating at my cousin's wedding in Dallas. It was truly a glorious evening, filled with joy and tradition, music and dancing. And now, traditionally, Jews do not get married during the 3-week period between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. But alas, there I was in Dallas, standing beneath the chuppah with my cousin and her now husband. After the reception, I went upstairs to check my cell phone and learned that since I had left it alone on Friday evening, there had been 2 mass shootings in America. In El Paso, Texas, a white man opened fire at a Walmart, killing 22 souls, with the death toll still rising as some are succumbing to their wounds. And in Dayton, Ohio, a white man opened fire, killing 9. My stomach dropped, my face fell into my hands. I wanted to scream, how can this have happened? When will enough be enough? Many modern Jews do not commemorate Tisha B'Av because they have no connection with Jerusalem's ancient temple or the idea of a pre-diaspora Judaism. I want to plead that Sinat Chinam, senseless hatred, is just as present now as it ever has been. When parents are killed shielding their children from automatic gunfire, when Mexican Americans are behind crosshairs because of the nation their grandparents were born in, and when Jews, Christians, and Muslims are gunned down in their places of worship, Jerusalem is very much still burning. Eicha. How has the world come to this brutal place of hatred and violence? Unfortunately, this is a feeling that we have become too familiar with. When you hear the news, you no longer ask what happened, who would do something like this? With horror and defeat, we simply ask, how many? I am furious. Is there nothing that can be done? How can we take action against the gun violence epidemic of our neighbors to the south? I reached out to my colleague and my best friend. He said to me, "Don't you see? If they didn't do anything after Sandy Hook, they will never do anything at all." Now, I don't know if this is the right mentality to adopt. Surely simply throwing up our hands and saying, "I give up," is not an option. It is not what our Jewish sages teach us, for it is not up to us to complete the work, nor can we desist from the work altogether. We are required to take action, but eicha, how? In the book of Deuteronomy, God addresses the whole community. They are preparing to cross into the promised land. They are experiencing anxiety and change. God says to the people of Israel, "This day I set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore choose life, that you may live." The victims of this hatred do not get to choose life. That choice was brutally ripped away from them. And so we must honor their memories by ourselves choosing life, by choosing to live life with blessings. As Canadians, we do not have the option of taking action against the NRA or lobbying the American Congress. Yes, it is vitally important that our American neighbors fight for common sense gun laws. It is a necessity that action take place on the ground level. However, that is not where we make our stand. We must choose to challenge the hateful ideologies that perpetrate this kind of behavior. So how do we overcome fear? How do we combat hatred? We start with concern and move towards love. We are inundated with horrific news. It seems like every other day some terrible tragedy has taken place in some corner of the world. It would be so much easier to just turn off the TV, to stop reading the headlines, and to live a comfortable life in our Jewish corner of Tirana. To be honest, I am exhausted. I don't have the energy to continuously keep taking these spiritually draining assaults. I fear that our society is suffering from compassion fatigue. As the name itself suggests, compassion fatigue occurs when a caring person has run out of the energy needed to continue giving to others. When the problems of the world seem too great to be amended by the efforts of any sort of action. When a caring person is spiritually overwhelmed and defeated by the enormity of the need to which he or she is trying to respond. For we know that last weekend, gun violence affected many more communities than just Dayton and El Paso. Unfortunately, this struck closer to home, as Toronto had multiple shootings and casualties. We must remain concerned. Paul Tillich, a Protestant theologian for whom I have great respect, speaks about religion as a state of being ultimately concerned. Ultimate concern means knowing our place in relation to God. Tillich said that if God is the object of our faith, then our beliefs, our ethics and values will reflect that concern. When we are ultimately concerned about our fellow human beings, we understand our place with God and those around us. We know how and when to stand up and take up space. Not too much and not too little, but to take up space and to take action. With the month of Elul approaching and the High Holy Days on our horizon, we think about how we want our lives to be judged. We recognize that our legacy depends equally upon our actions in moments of ease and in the ways in which we react to challenges. We have reached a pivotal moment in the history of humanity. indifference to this calamitous moment is simply not an option. There is nothing more dangerous than apathy. Throughout the Torah, God instructs us to love your fellow. We must remain ultimately concerned, and then we must move from concern to love. Now, it is ostensibly pretty easy to love your partner, or to love your children, to love your friends. But we are instructed to love your fellow, to dedicate time and affection to the other, to the stranger. This is truly a timely lesson, for the categorical other in our society is in true need of love. And how do we manifest this love for our fellow humans? We dedicate ourselves to stand up and use our voices to help all peoples. I am reminded of the prominent poetic words of Martin Niemöller, a German pastor during World War II who famously penned the words, "First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." A simple yet powerful message. We show our love by speaking up and being there for the other among us. This poem is commanding and timeless. I would love to share with you the potent words of Rabbi Michael Adam Latz, who modified this classic piece to echo the lessons embedded within it. Rabbi Adam Latz writes, "First they came for the African Americans, and I spoke up, because I am my sister's and my brother's keeper. And then they came for women, and I spoke up, because women hold up half of the sky. And then they came for immigrants, and I spoke up, because I remember the ideals of our democracy. And then they came for the Muslims, and I spoke up, because they are my cousins, and we are one human family. And then they came for the First Nations and Mother Earth, and I spoke up, because the land cries and the mountains weep. They keep coming, and we will keep rising up, because we Jews know the cost of silence. We remember where we came from, and we will link arms, because when you come for our neighbors, you come for us, and that just won't stand." To love another means to give of oneself, to stand up for all people, and to dedicate time, concern, and affection. As Canadians, we understand that taking action against gun violence is just as important here as anywhere else. We have seen a correlation between the loosening gun laws over the past decade and an increase in gun activity. Yes, the death toll by guns in Canada is but a fraction of the rate as it is in the U.S. But we are the second highest among the developed nations of the world. The border is a permeable place, and Toronto streets are being flooded with illegal guns that are being smuggled into our country. According to the RCMP's research, Canadians are in possession of somewhere between 10 and 20 million guns. And yet, as of March of 2019, only 2.2 million Canadians have gun licenses, with only 90,000 approved to be carrying guns in their day-to-day lives. So what can we do? One outlet for action is to get involved with the Coalition for Gun Control. Founded in the wake of the Montreal Massacre in 1989, the Coalition for Gun Control was formed to support strategies to reduce gun death, injury, and crime. For almost 30 years, the Coalition has been working to make Canada safer and is supported by more than 200 organizations around Canada. Most recently, they were focusing their efforts on strengthening Bill C-71 and promoting a ban on handguns throughout the country. Bill C-71, which has received royal assent and will soon become law, requires gun vendors to keep records of sales, a common sense practice that had been in place since 1977. However, in 1995, this part of the Firearms Act was removed when the centralized registry for rifles and shotguns was created, requiring individuals to obtain firearm registrations. And when the registry was dismantled and 6 million records were destroyed, this requirement was not restored. And as a result, we have no information about who purchases rifles and shotguns in Canada and no way to trace them. It goes without saying that this is a dangerous problem to have. We must speak out. We have a responsibility to reach out to our members of Parliament and tell them where we stand on this issue. We can take a look at the Coalition for Gun Control website. Their resources can help us contact our members of Parliament. We can sign their petitions, and they provide incredible social media content that we can share with our networks. Hatred is emboldened by silence, and so silence is not an option. Tomorrow is Tisha B'Av, the Jewish people's collective day of mourning. We commemorate our suffering and allow ourselves to be moved by our dark history. It is my hope that we will also be moved by the present condition of our society. We are plagued with Sinat Chinam, baseless and violent hatred. May we never grow apathetic to the epidemic that is growing around us. May we move from concern for our neighbors to combating hatred with love. On this Shabbat Chazon, may we envision our world not necessarily perfected, but at least amended and better protected. For we Jews know the cost of silence. We remember where we came from, and we will link arms, because when you come for our neighbors, you come for us, and that just won't stand. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may the protection of our people be God's will.